Hi, this is Terry Francona, and you're listening to Out of Left Field on the Grueling Truth Network.
Hey, guys, welcome back to Out of Left Field. Graham and Chris with you again, and a packed show today. Again, a seemingly Red Cross-centric show. A lot of injuries to get to, suspensions, and a rookie that is almost quite literally tearing the cover off the ball, setting all kinds of records as a brand new Major League player, and the power that he is showing with his Major League ball club up in Ohio. Let's put the ball in play, and let's get let's go ahead and get the nasty story out of the way, Chris, and that is that Dodgers pitcher Julio Urias, who we have kind of gotten to know and then see him get put back down to the minors and up and down, is now on a 20-game suspension under the Major League Baseball joint domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse policy. That sounds all terrible, because it is. He will get a 20-game suspension for a May 13th incident in Los Angeles after eyewitnesses and videos reporting showed him shoving a female companion to the ground. He was placed on leave by the Dodgers the following day, and then officially now the commissioner's office has handed down the 20-game suspension, which Arias has said he will not appeal.
Well, I think that's probably the smartest thing he's done in this situation so far. Obviously, he did cooperate fully with the investigation. He didn't try to hide anything. It seems like he knows he did something wrong, but, that's not – knowing you did something wrong isn't good enough in a situation like this, in my opinion. Luckily, no one got hurt. The young woman wasn't injured in any way, but we're talking about a kid who's 23 years old and a Major League Baseball player, and for whatever reason felt like it was okay to shove someone down in a parking lot. And sure, he's youthful. Sure, you can give all the excuses that there are in the book, but at the end of the day, I don't even know if 20 games is long enough. I mean, realistically, this should probably end his season. It's a crappy place to end the season, but it's not exactly like it's going to hurt the Dodgers if it does. The sad thing here, aside from the obvious sad thing, which is that he felt like it was okay to push another person down in the parking lot, the sad thing here is that you and I actually spoke rather highly of Urias at one point. You and I thought that maybe he was going to be a staple in that rotation, and then that didn't really work out. He does start a game here and there, but I think at one point a couple years ago, you and I were thinking that when Kershaw was really suffering from that back injury, we were like, hey, if Urias can step up, it would do a lot of good things for the Dodgers.
Well, and he has enjoyed a really good season as a bullpen piece. Been a long reliever, 67 2/3, almost 68 full innings pitched. An ERA of 2.53 as a lefty makes him a very high commodity. And the Dodgers did release a statement saying, quote, "While we are disappointed in what occurred and support the decision by the commissioner's office, we are also encouraged that Julio has taken responsibility for his actions and believe he will take the necessary steps to learn from this incident," close quote. And you brought up a very interesting point, and I want to ask you this because I found the, kind of the vigor behind what you said, if that's the right word. There was a very, you're very emotionally connected to this. We both are. We're both married. You have a daughter. So obviously you take anything like this even closer to home because you want to raise your daughter not to obviously be accepting of that as every parent, you would think would want to. But you mentioned that this should end his season. And that brings me back to, and we don't know this policy quite as well as we do the drug policy, right? But
right.
Would you be a supporter, and I think I already know the answer to this, which I guess would make me a good lawyer because I always say don't ask a question unless you already know the answer. But would you be a supporter of any suspension under one of the policies, be it domestic violence or the joint drug agreement policy, that should eliminate you from postseason contention with your team?
Yes. I would be comfortable with that. Absolutely. Um, either of those, wow. When you're talking about the drug policy, are we talking specifically performance-enhancing drugs, or?
Right. Yeah. PED. I'm not. If you're doing, marijuana or whatever, which we don't really even see marijuana being openly tested for that we know of in Major
Right.
League Baseball, but one of those things, that's a different story. But we're talking, like, PEDs, like we talked about with Tim Beckham last week, that kind of thing.
Yes, I could fully support a postseason ban for something like that. Absolutely. I think that when you've committed a crime like this, or when you've broken the rules in the interests of enhancing your play chemically, I think that you have already really eliminated yourself from as a person who should be allowed to participate in postseason play. The good thing that I'm seeing here from Urias is that he at least understands that what he did was wrong, that he needs to take responsibility for it, saying, quote, that he accepts, quote, full responsibility for what I believe was my inappropriate conduct during this incident. Now, that's a slippery worded statement, right? He takes responsibility for what he believes was inappropriate, but who knows what that might have been, right? If that was the shoving or the arguing or what. But he does go on to say, quote, even in this instance where there is no injury or history of violence, I understand and agree that major league players should be held to a higher standard. I hold myself to a higher standard as well. I have taken proactive steps to help me grow as a person on and off the field and in my relationships. And I really, really hope that he is earnest, that he understands that what he did was wrong, that he understands that that's unacceptable behavior, not just because it was against a woman, not just because he shoved a woman down, but because he shouldn't be putting his hands on anyone, on any human being at any time. And that what he's saying, that he does hold himself to a higher standard, that he is going to take steps to grow as a person and in his relationships, is actually true and not just lip service to make fans more accepting of his return.
Yeah, I can certainly appreciate how contrite that he is, and that he is taking a seemingly pretty hefty semblance of responsibility here, which is nice. Certainly, different than what we see a lot of times with PED suspensions. At the end of it, it is 20 games. We've seen enough how players come back from this and eventually it gets forgotten, right? How many, if I said to you, name a prominent pitcher who has been suspended under the domestic violence policy, could you name one?
Yeah. Well,
exactly. And if it takes you and I this long, think of the casual fan. And the first name in my mind is Aroldis Chapman, who fired a gun off in his garage in Miami.
Right.
A couple of years ago. Exactly.
Wow.
And it's forgotten. So in the end of this, I do appreciate how contrite he is. I do certainly hope he does take the steps to go ahead and better himself as a person.
What about oh man, I feel bad now because I don't remember his name.
You're talking about the Astros reliever.
No, Cubbies. Cubbies shortstop. What's his name?
Oh, well, I was saying pitcher, but yeah. Wow, we will. Talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. Did he end up getting suspended? He did come in late this year, right? Because of the
beginning of the year he was, exactly. And it is one of those things where,
and that's not a name we should forget. It's just we're both happen to be drawing a blank right now because we didn't really expect to bring the guy up.
But at the end of it, like I say, I am I do appreciate the contrition.
Addison Russell.
I do appreciate the contrition that he seems to show. And I do hope that big picture, he will go ahead and better himself as a human being. And that's really, I think, at this point, all we need to say on the matter. he will serve the suspension, and I hope the Dodgers do what the Cubs did, stand behind him in the sense of.
Speaking of which, speaking of Addison Russell was actually just recalled yesterday. Albert Almora Jr. was sent back down to AAA, and Addison Russell was recalled off the suspended list yesterday after being suspended 40 games for violating the domestic violence policy.
Wow.
So yeah, that's interesting, right? And then when he came back, he was playing AAA. He was playing in Iowa, doing obviously doing well in Iowa. He's still a Major League Baseball player, still a Major League caliber star. But yes, interesting the timing on this that Arias gets suspended the day after the other big name in domestic violence in baseball gets recalled to the majors.
Right. I mean, now Almora has been up this year. He was struggling, and they sent him back down to go ahead and try and kind of find his way back into the fold. But we're looking at a very small sample size for Russell this year. He was hitting, I think, just over 240, which is certainly not near the 317 that he was hitting last year. But yeah, at the end of it, what I do hope is that the Dodgers do stand with Arias in the way the Cubs did with Russell. That as long as he is willing to better himself, and they are going to push him to go to whatever counseling or follow the things that he needs to go ahead and better himself as a human being. I think that's a good thing for the Dodgers to do for a young man who is serving the penalty for the actions that he committed. Now, moving on. All right, let's go ahead and get away from this. We went ahead and opened the show on a bit of a on a note that neither of us really wanted to get to, but we also didn't want to sit on it the entire time. Jake Arrieta, we mentioned this in the last week or so, that there's a possibility that he could be done. He does. And unfortunately for him, this ends up being a season-ending surgery, bone spurs in the elbow. And, we talked about this, man. His numbers have not been that great in the last couple of years. Really, Chicago saw the writing on the wall. Now, granted, we both argued who should they have kept Arrieta or gone after Darvish. Arrieta was the safer bet, but neither one was really, that good either way. But he will undergo the surgery to this month. He's 33 years old, looking at an ERA over 5 this year. Had an ERA, 4.6 this year, almost 4 last year, and that is really pushing his ERA to a career 3.72, which is kind of crazy to think after a Cy Young winning year in 2015 where he had a 1.77 ERA. He has not had an ERA below 2 since that year.
Well, and what really is sort of frustrating about Jake Arrieta is when we were having that conversation, because I remember this because we had this discussion and you and I kind of were at odds about the Darvish Arrieta thing. And I don't remember who was on which side. One of us thought that Darvish was a safer choice.
I thought Darvish, and I thought Darvish was going to be the smarter pick. You said Arrieta, and off of raw numbers and what we have, you're correct.
Well, to be fair, though,
we both know at the end of this has not turned into what either one of us thought that either ball club was going to get. To be completely fair and honest, neither of us were really right. Jake Arrieta moved to the Phillies and had an abysmal year with an almost 4 ERA at 3.96, and then we all watched Darvish have that just horrifying collapse where he just could not spot a pitch to save his life or to preserve a Cubs win all year that year. Realistically, I think that we were both sort of on the wrong side of the same coin here with that discussion that we had. Right.
And what's sort of upsetting about this whole thing is, sure, you hear a big name like Jake Arrieta, and you're like, oh man, Jake Arrieta is going to go out. Jake Arrieta is going to be gone for the rest of the season. The Phillies, at this point, I don't think the Phillies care. You got an ERA near 5. He's only thrown 135 innings in 24 games. He's 8-8, and at this point, when you've got a guy who's got 8 no decisions, right, and only 8 wins, what are they really losing? The guy's got a walks and hits per inning pitched of 1.4, almost 1.5 walks per innings pitched, and the guy's given up 10 hits per 9. I mean,
and the difficulty here for him is that he is the competitive heartbeat of this ball club. He is, right? It's a young ball club, and he really has been. I know your look, but think about it. Think about who's out in the media calling out the team for failures, right? We got to be better. We should be, we can't make these mental mistakes.
I
Call
think
out Bryce Harper for being ejected. Hey,
I was going to say, I think the person that put that look on my face is exactly the person that Arrieta is calling out in the media, and that's Bryce Harper. You would think that Bryce Harper, with all the money he's getting paid, and as energetic and as gung-ho as he usually is, you would think Bryce Harper would be the competitive heartbeat of this team. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. Not necessarily a competitive heartbeat, but definitely the moral compass, right?
Yeah,
or the competitive compass,
or the competitive voice,
right?
Voice, okay. And he is the one that's going to call out for lackadaisical play, but then it's very hard to go ahead and take that when you're struggling like he is. He's a guy who, challenged fans who used to troll him on social media about him being poor. Just you wait, I'm going to win a Cy Young, and he did. And we looked at, man, he is just, this guy's awesome. What happened? And you look at this, and at the end of the day, he's going to end up he's going to retire with a ring, and that's going to be it. He's a 106 and 75 guy, a 586 winning percentage, and a career 372 ERA with just over 1,300 strikeouts. I mean, he is not, the sum of a 2 or 3 year stretch, unfortunately, is mired by what was coming before and what is still happening after his time in Chicago. It is a loss for Philadelphia, who is still trying to find their way through a very, all of a sudden, surprisingly competitive NL East, where we thought it might be one of the weaker divisions. Now, I thought the Mets would be better than they were, but still, we did not see the kind of competition brewing that has all of a sudden exploded onto the national baseball scene.
Right. I don't think either of us thought that the Phillies were necessarily going to be better than they are, but I don't think at the same time that I thought we would see the Phillies in a better position than they are now, just because of how poor I thought the competition in that league was going to be.
I don't think that at 120 games in, roughly just over 120 games in, that we thought that the Phillies would be only 6 games over 500.
Right.
So yes, this hurts, just from the standpoint of you've got to have somebody else step up.
Well,
now you did pick up Jason Vargas in a trade from the Mets, so at least you do have an arm that you acquired to fill in that gap. But again, it's still not somebody who is going to give you anything that great, because Vargas's ERA is over 4 as well.
You ever notice, though? I'm going to use a little bit of a mixed metaphor here. You ever notice when you're watching a boxing match, and as you get into the match, right, they're dancing and dodging and punching, and then it really seems to go downhill. Like you'll see a guy start to land combos, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, duck, move, 1, 2, 3, 1, move, right? Well, that's pretty much what's going on with the Phils right now. Because if it's not bad, it's not just bad that Jake Arrieta is going to be done for the season, but so's their reliever, David Robertson. I mean, the guy goes down for not just the rest of this season, but all of next season, most likely too, as he goes down and has Tommy John surgery. We're talking about a guy who
was the most coveted reliever last year.
Was the most sought after guy in the relief pitcher ranks last offseason, and now you figured, hey, this guy, and this is exactly the opposite of what you ever expected to hear about him, right? Because when you thought of David Robertson last year, what you thought was, this guy has pitched in 60 or more appearances in almost every season of his last 8 years.
Right. Yeah. The last time that he was under 60 was in 2009, and he was in 45, pitched in 45 games, in 43 innings. Other than that, he's been upwards of 60 innings every single year, and then this year it was 6.2. The elbow has been hurting him consistently. A 5.4 ERA in 7 games. Had an ERA of 3.2 last year, which takes away from that 1.84 that really made him what made him so sought after to begin with. But again, at the end of this is the way the Phillies season has seemed to go. And you mentioned this, ducking punches and whatnot. It feels as though if they manage to land a combo, right? Bryce Harper hits a walk-off grand slam, galvanizes the team a little bit, puts some little fire into that ball club, and then this happens. And no matter what this ball club seems to try and do, something always ends up getting in the way and just sucking the wind out of their sails when they seem to just get a little bit of momentum, which again makes my dad happy. As a Braves fan growing up, I don't follow the same fandom anymore because of my time as an umpire doing the show now. I try to separate myself from fandom, but to see the Braves succeed does make me happy, and it's nice to see. But man, at the end of the day, this does, I think, have to worry you a little bit, because when Arrieta was kind of what the Phillies were banking on as being the primary focus of their rotation, Aaron Nola was an afterthought who finishes third in the Cy Young and makes you go, oh, where the hell did that come from?
Right.
So if Nola wasn't doing what he does, and then Arrieta goes down, you've spent $330 whatever million on Harper, and now you've got to go out and try and find yourself a rotation. And we already know that you don't have a huge window for this current group of players. McCutchen is hurt. Hoskins is still there. He's out right now with the hand injury. This has really been an injury-plagued baseball season across the board. The Yankees, the Phillies, all kinds of different teams. The Indians, the Kluber. It's been stupid, the number of injured list players that we have seen. But this is something that is going to plague the Phillies as we continue through our top 5, bottom 3, which we'll discuss here in a few minutes. And when we get to our final power rankings, and the crazy thing right now, when you look at where we're at, we can begin to go ahead and start to separate the postseason eligible teams from those that aren't. When we get to our final power ranking, I know it kind of stinks. We missed a couple of months. We didn't get you all the rankings we wanted to, but the Phillies are, I think, on that bubble of the outside looking in, and without that waiver deadline anymore that we had, that changes their ability to go out and grab somebody and make them playoff eligible.
Right. And at this point, and we talked about this when we talked about that rule change at the beginning of the year, how this was really going to force teams to take long, hard looks in the mirror as August 1st came rushing at them. And I feel like, despite some very bold writing on the wall, I feel like the Phillies didn't do that this year. And I mean, they made a lot of moves in the offseason, right? I mean, Harper, McCutchen, Segura, Realmuto. I mean, they made some moves. But unfortunately, when those moves didn't really pan out the way that they expected them to, especially the Bryce Harpers and the Gene Seguras, who I don't know if it's just me, but I haven't really heard that name much this year. I think when those things didn't pan out the way that the Phillies thought they were going to, what should have happened is July 31st, there should have been a flurry of movement in that front office, and there just wasn't.
Yeah, well, I will caveat the end of the point with this is that I'm not sure if I would have wanted to see a flurry of movement, only because I think we have seen that they are still a team trying to figure out their identity with Bryce Harper. There are expectations, but the identity that they currently have with the players and personnel that they have, I don't think are conducive to meeting those expectations yet, which is, again, a very difficult thing when their window we don't think is that big. So it's a balancing act of, okay, let's see what we have. Let's see with who we have, how they play into it, and then let's work in the offseason to go ahead and put those right pieces together to fill the puzzle and make them competitive. And I do think that the Yankees will, along with the Phillies and possibly the Braves, will be a team looking for pitching help. And with the Mets not being willing to move a DeGrom or a Syndergaard in the offseason, and the fact that all three of those teams are either a New York rival or two teams from the National League East, they're not going to see Syndergaard or DeGrom on the trading block, even if he is, unless
Right.
they pay a king's ransom for it. So it will be interesting. Garrett Cole is going to be the big piece this year. We will be talking about that plenty come November and December. But right now, yeah, it's just going to be a matter of this team trying to figure out, and I'm sure the front office already is doing it, is starting to look ahead and go, okay, we know who we have. We know what our farm system is. Who do we have that we can either bring in or bring up to start to make this team a consistent team across the board? In additional injury news, a team that you had in the preseason picked as kind of a surprise team in the National League West that is doing much better than my surprise team, the Rockies, who are on the bottom, and we're not going to discuss that. Fernando Tatis Jr., the rookie for the San Diego Padres, a Rookie of the Year candidate without a doubt, is expected to miss the remainder of the season with a back injury. Drove him to the IL earlier on the day yesterday, and apparently much more serious than expected. Tatis with a 317, 379, 590 slash on the year. 22 home runs, 16 steals in an era where the stolen base is not as prevalent as it used to be, but damn, it is still sexy as it used to be. A kid who is still learning discipline at the plate. I mean, strikeouts per walk is certainly up there. 110 strikeouts to 30 walks in 84 games. That's not the best.
Lot.
Yeah, it's a bit. That's a bit. But again, he, like we said, he snagged 16 bases, caught 6 times. Not a bad split. I mean, at all. Looking, over a 75 or so percent success rate, I believe. I'm not a math major, but I think that's what I'm looking at there. This is worrisome, but again, we don't have a ton of information, Chris, as to what the back injury is. So I'm not really sure how concerned I should be. Because if you already know the Padres aren't going to make it into the postseason, which is obvious at this point. I mean, they're done. They're 8 games out of the wild card. There's really not much chance. It's not mathematically impossible, but I do not see them passing the Reds, the Diamondbacks, the Giants, the Mets, the Brewers, and the Phillies, with the Cubs and the Nationals as well involved in there. It's just going to be I don't see it.
I don't either, and I think that Fernando Tatis Jr. is probably going to be fine. I'm sure the back injury is worrying for him right now. They did say it was a stress reaction in the back, so hopefully that's all going to work out just fine. Who this is really worrisome for is the San Diego Padres. This is one of those injuries that does in fact hurt his team. I mean, we're talking about a kid who in his rookie year has a WAR over 4. Right? The kid is worth 4 wins above replacement, all by his little lonesome. And it's not just his slash line that's doing it. He is a lights-out defender. He is probably one of the more electrifying shortstops at least in the National League. And that includes his neighbor up north in L.A., who is probably the most electrifying left side of the infield player in the National League. And not having him on the field day in and day out is going to be a detriment to a team that could, in fact, were they able to make a push, end up right around where I envision them this year at around 3rd place.
Yeah, a 3rd place ending certainly is possible. I mean,
well, I don't know if it is without Tatis.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, you're 4 games behind the Diamondbacks, and you're 5 behind the Giants. This is one of those. I'm not totally sure it would have mattered anyway. I think they're a team that would likely have utilized the expanded rosters to get a true feel of the depth of your farm system. We've already heard and said multiple times on this show that they do have one of the deepest and best farm systems in the big leagues right now. So I would expect to see them bring those guys up, see what they really have. Can they flip those guys for some extra pieces? Are they guys they want to bring up and keep control over? So I don't think that the Padres are going to make a concerted effort to try and finish any higher. Finishing in 3rd is still not going to put you into wild card contention, really. And the fact you have to go against the Dodgers still doesn't really bode well for them.
Right. And I never would have said, you're never going to hear me say that they're going to beat the Dodgers. They're not going to beat the Dodgers. But what you will hear me say is that Tatis offered them and gave them, in my opinion, I mean, between him and Manny Machado and you'll have to forgive me, the first baseman that they signed,
Eric
Hosmer. Those players in that position did give them and provide them the opportunity to climb up out of the basement in that division. And they did so. And not just because the Colorado Rockies forgot to flip the light switch on and trip down the basement steps and ended up sprawled on the floor down there, but also because I think that they were a better team than last place, regardless of how poorly other teams played. And is Kyle Seager a better ball player than Tatis Jr. right now? I think maybe you could say he is. Defensively, he's a strong defensive shortstop.
You mean Corey?
Corey.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking his brother.
I'm like, I thought Kyle still plays for the Mariners.
Here's the problem with the Seagers.
I was disconnected too.
Here's the problem with the Seagers. The Seagers are like the Daryl from the Bob Newhart show, right? Because his Daryl plays in L.A., but his brother Daryl plays for the Mariners, and then their other brother Daryl. He plays for
lost
the
our
AAA.
entire audience.
Oh yeah, they're all younger than me, huh?
Just about.
That's rude.
If you do if you do get the reference, please send us a message out of left field with Chris and Graham on Facebook, or tweet us at OOLeftField or at Chris_OOLF.
No one likes you, right? No one at all likes you.
I didn't say it.
But you put Tatis Jr., who is an electrifying type shortstop, a strong middle infielder, over on the left side of that infield next to Manny Machado, and that always gives you an opportunity to win ball games. And without him there, I think that hurts them a lot more than some of these other injuries that we've talked about today.
It does, and that's why I like the fact they're not going to go ahead and push for the recovery. There's no point for it. Allow him to rest. Give him the next 4 or 5 months to go ahead and get that back strong and come back. That way you can go ahead and put the full torque and everything else that's going to happen for your swing, and get yourself ready to play. I mean, you already have 22 home runs in 84 games. The kid was on a decent path to go ahead and have, 30 or 40 dingers in his rookie year. It's a pretty good stretch. The only thing that it really opens up that will be a fun conversation here in the coming weeks is going to be Rookie of the Year. And
Right.
we'll discuss that down the road. Right. Finally, and this is the most concerning injury, and we're not going to touch on it too long. I don't want to make it a Red Cross-centric. And there's one more player that you wanted to talk about, which I know has been some crazy stats before we get to our top 5, bottom 3. But this is probably the biggest concern of everything, and that is that Chris Sale is on the injured list with left elbow inflammation. Dave Dombrowski, Red Sox president of baseball operations, says the injury is, quote, brand new, close quote. And the scariest part of this is that the team is seeking a second opinion from one Dr. James Andrews. And that name should sound very familiar. I know it sounds familiar to David Robertson, as Dr. Andrews is really the king when it comes to Tommy John surgery. So, this is, again, something that the Red Sox, do you need to keep Sale up and going? They're 6.5 games out of the wild card. It has been an abysmal year for them. I get they're probably going to go ahead and still want to try and make a push, but big picture, we all both agree that, this is not the year for them. At the end of this, I mean, this is still a guy who has the career record for all-time strikeouts per 9 and a strikeout-to-walk ratio. He has 11.1 strikeouts per 9 innings and a 5.37 strikeouts per walk ratio. But this year, 6-11, a 4.4 ERA, and 147 innings pitched, giving up 24 home runs already. Again, a guy over 200 strikeouts, 218 strikeouts, but it has not been a good year for him at all. And I think we can agree that as Chris Sale goes, so do the Boston Red Sox. They are different than their rival, the Yankees, where their rotation does not quite mirror the strength of their bats. In this case, very much so the Red Sox are struggling, as is their left-handed ace.
Out of curiosity, if Chris Sale has Tommy John surgery, is that the end of the Red Sox window?
Wow. Probably, at least right now. I mean, do you keep Bradley? Do you keep Benintendi? Man, that's tough. I mean, if he has Tommy John, that means he won't be back till he's 32 as a lefty. Boy, that's a loaded question. Yeah, I think it does. Not just because, and they have him under contract until he's 36 years old, but my bigger reasoning behind the answer yes is I think that the Rays and the Yankees will continue to improve. The Yankees are a team that has a lot of young talent and is going to end up moving on from some of their veteran players and bringing in additional young talent. It's going to be very hard, I think, to compete with them consistently, especially with Sale going out. And you got to pay a lot of money for 2 years and understand that if he is not on the bump next year for you, it is all but probably a wash.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Graham, you kind of alluded to this a little bit as you went into the Chris Sale conversation, that there was a kid that I want to talk about, and we're not going to talk about him for too long because there's really not a whole lot to talk about. Guy's only played 15 career Major League Baseball games, 16 if you include the one game he played in 2018.
So why are we talking about him?
Well, because in 15 games this year,
14 strikeouts, man.
Well, he's also he's only got 18 hits in 15 games, which that's not impressive at all. 14 strikeouts, 18 hits, except that 10 of those 18.
Why is he slugging 961?
Yeah, because 10 of those 18 hits went over the wall.
Like a ground rule double?
No, in the good way. See, here's the thing. There's this guy. His name is Aristides Aquino. He plays for the Cincinnati Reds, unfortunately for him. And he needs a nickname. Aristides Aquino, that's a lot. That's a mouthful. I kind of like, since his name already starts with an A, we're just going to go ahead and call him Al. Big Al. Because he hits dingers.
Great homage to the Little League World Series, which is currently going on the ESPN family of networks.
We're talking about a kid who now has 2 Major League Baseball records. First person to hit 10 home runs in his first 12 games. First person to hit 8 home runs in less than 10 games. And he just doesn't slow down. You expect him to, and then, bam, he's whacking the ball over the wall again. I don't know. 15 games is a small sample size. You know that. I know that. But we're talking about a kid who is able to come into Major League Baseball like a whirlwind, post a 353, 400, 961 slash line with an OPS of 1.361. Now, think of the people who we're talking about in the Rookie of the Year conversations. None of them did something like this. None of them. Think about the guys who we were super excited to watch come up and play in this league, and who, despite some struggles, we thought have done a good job, played really good baseball this year, right? Not playing like this.
I mean, it's, the guy has grounded into as many double plays as many times as he has been intentionally walked. One, which, in and of itself, 11 extra base hits, a double, then you said 10 long balls, 19 RBI, which the 19 RBI is the most indicative thing about why his offensive WAR is 1.
Right.
That thing should be through the roof.
Right.
But again, playing for the Reds, it is really impressive.
He's got nobody on base in front of him.
Right. And this is a team who moved on from Scooter Gennett, which I don't fault them for. I understand it. I mean, you're struggling right now. There is definitely some positive outlook for this team, but still at the end of it, they are still a team in flux trying to establish consistency. And that's okay right now, but eventually, it is kind of hard to go ahead and move on from Gennett when you're bringing up, this kid in Aquino. But hey, with the way he's playing, you ride the train as long as you can, and you hope that it translates into consistent success. It's not going to be video game easy for the kid, but if you can have something like this and you have control for the next 4 or 5 years while he's 25 years old, that's not too shabby.
Especially if he continues to hit maybe I'm exaggerating. He's only managed to hit 7 singles. And because he has 1 double and 10 home runs. But if he can keep hitting like this, if he can keep on, not obviously nobody expects him to keep hitting 350 for the rest of his life, right? Nobody expects him to have a 1.3 OPS for the rest of his career. But if he can keep that OPS up around 1,000, up around 1.1, hit 290, 300, something like that, this kid's going to find himself on a plaque here real soon.
We'll see how well he adjusts. Pitchers are going to adjust to him rapidly. I really want to see how well that he adjusts. And this is one of those things. And we think about this. This is very telling about a player, right? That's kind of what we're geared for. Is, well, he's struggling. They're adjusting to him. They're not making the adjustments. He's got to get better at that. That can be a damning indictment of that hitting coach. This is when I want to see what is that coaching staff's ability to help a young player adjust to big league pitching when they begin to work around and find his weaknesses. So that really is key, because that staff is what's going to help the Reds find some semblance of a foothold in a jam-packed National League Central in the years going forward.
I'm really interested to see his heat chart when he's at the plate. What part of the zone he's hottest in? What part of the zone he's?
It's the zone over the wall.
Oh, is that it? Is that the zone?
Appears to be.
Just to see if there's a place that pitchers can throw to him, where it might, be safer. A place where he can't hit, right?
Right. Sure.
And I apologize. I'm looking for that right now.
Well, but and again, I mean, this at the end of it for this kid, it's, and I have it up here. So pretty much, he has hit. I believe
not.
He's pretty much hitting straight down the pipe. So, a lot of it, now he's liking down and away. But this is a kid who really is getting a lot of mistake pitches down the middle and, just below the belt, and is turning on him. And that really has been his key. So I'm not saying that what he's doing is a fluke. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to do what he is doing, but at the same time, this is one of those things where, we are seeing that, at least as far as this goes, that it does look as though he's turning on the mistake pitches and making something happen, which is good.
Well, it seems like it's that time again.
Top 5, bottom 3. And again, let's go ahead and preface this just got a notification from ESPN. Aristides Aquino, 11th career home run and 17th career game. Averaging a home run every 5 at-bats.
Wow. Well, we're going to need to update those statistics. All right, moving right along I'm just going to give a brief rundown real quick so everybody knows where everybody's sitting right now. Not a whole lot has changed since last week. The one major change is that Minnesota and Cleveland are no longer tied for that top spot. Minnesota is now 2 games ahead of Cleveland.
The Cardinals lead the Central.
Right, the Cardinals lead the Central.
And the Yankees lead the – oh, never mind.
Oh, yeah, not a change. So we got the Yankees, the Rays, right? The Rays 11 games back of the Yankees in the East. Boston a further 6.5 games behind the Rays. And then Toronto and Baltimore are are they – do they still play baseball in Baltimore? Is that a thing?
I mean, people buy tickets.
Oof. Should they? In the AL Central, you got Minnesota on top. Like I said, 2 games ahead of Cleveland. And then it just drops off from there. You got the White Sox. The White Sox are 18.5 games back. The Royals are 30 games back. And I think Detroit hasn't defrosted yet, and they're just not playing anymore. They're 35.5 games out of first place in that division, which is almost as many wins as they have. You've got Houston still on top in the West for now, crawling right up behind them quickly, as this last series between the two teams has shown, are the Oakland Athletics. who are only 6.5 games behind Houston in the West. Texas is 17 games back. They're out. The LA Angels obviously out at 18 games back. And Seattle, despite the hot start, is 27 games out of first place in the American League West.
Flipping it over to the National League, the Braves still sit comfortably on top, 72 and 52. The Nationals 4.5 games back, though, and currently leading the charge in the wild card. So a playoff team. They are 8-2 in their last 10 winners of 5 straight. Remember that number. The Phillies in third place. You mentioned 64 and 58, half game out of the wild card. They have won 4 straight, of course, on the heels of that walk-off grand slam by Bryce Harper. Hilariously, he sat and watched the ball for about 4 seconds and then rounded the bases in 12.
Right, which makes you wonder, is like, oh, he knows he watched that one go, so he sprinted around the bases.
It was honestly, that was the most enthusiastic I have seen Bryce Harper in a long time. It was honestly kind of nice to see. He was just absolutely. I don't know if it was his first walk-off. I'm sure it was his first walk-off granny, but to see him be that excited was kind of cool. The Mets 9 games back, but 2.5 out of the wild card. The Marlins sitting well back at 45 and 76. The only team in the NL East below 500, something to keep an eye on. That's a bit surprising there. The Mets 2 games over, but hey, right now 2 games over is still 2 games over. In the Central, the Cardinals surprisingly on top, a half game up over the Cubbies, who beat the Pittsburgh Pirates this afternoon. The Milwaukee Brewers sit third. They are 2 games back and a game and a half out of the wild card. The Reds, as we mentioned, at 57 and 64, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, an abysmal 51 and 71, just looking really, really poor, 3 and 7 in their last 10. The Dodgers in the West in full control. They can go ahead and hang the division pennant up in Chavez Ravine right now. That's not going to change. The Giants 19 and a half games back at 62 and 61, but they are 3 games out of the wild card, still in contention, as are the Diamondbacks, who are just a game behind the Giants, a game below 500 as well, and the Padres, and then the Rockies, unfortunately, rounding out the bottom of the West, which is still just an absolute punch in the gut for me and anybody else who really thought that the Rockies were going to be a team to be, to not be fought with this season. So let's go ahead and touch on our top 5, bottom 3. A reminder, this is only top 5, bottom 3 teams of the week. So the teams that we thought this week came out, played the best, kind of taking the overall look and then how they're doing. So for me, the odd one here is I don't have the Astros in my top 5. Losers of 5 straight. I think only won 2 games this week. Lost game 2 of a doubleheader to the White Sox on Tuesday, and have lost every game since then, on top of losing by a run 8-7 to the Orioles on Sunday last week after beating them 23-2 the day prior. So a very poor week for Houston. So they're not in my top 5. If it was a power ranking, they would easily be in the top 5 of my power ranking. No question there. And I think you would agree on that. But I'm going to go ahead and put the Yankees on top. Aaron Boone ejected again. This is getting a little bit old, okay? He's starting to just become a bit childish, just arguing for no reason. And, at some point, just knock it off, all right? You've made your point. We know that you're fighting for your team, but it's getting a little bit over the top, and it's losing a bit of the luster of it, because now you're playing, unless you're trying to play up this whole it's us against the world, but you have a great team, you're a good manager, just calm it down a little bit, I think. But they're 7-3 in the last 10, so I have the Yankees number 1, the Dodgers number 2. They are 8-2 in their last 10. The only reason that I have the Yankees 1 spot above is because they are 1 game better than the Dodgers in their record. So it's pretty easy. You look at that and who the Yankees are playing. I'm going to go ahead and give the edge there. And the Nationals at number 3 for the week. A very good week for them. They are 8-2 in their last 10 winners of 5 straight at 66 and 55. And then the Athletics and the Rays round out my top 5. Bottom 3, quick and simple. The Orioles, the Marlins, and the Pirates. Marlins 3-7, the Pirates 3-7, and the Orioles 1-9. in their last 10. That one coming at the expense of the Houston Astros, and the Orioles have lost 5 straight since that victory last week.
We differ a little bit. I think the names, I think we only differ in one team in our top 5. We differ a little bit in where we place them, I think.
I believe you put a Central Division leader in your top 5, if I heard your kind of your pre-show self-conversation correctly.
No, I didn't actually. It was
really? Okay.
It was I was going to, and then I pulled them. So let's just start. I got the Yankees at number 1, best team in baseball right now, and certainly have earned it. They've won 2 in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Yada 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 yada. All the things that you just said. The Dodgers at number 2 for all the reasons that you enumerated previously. I got the Nationals at number 3. I am happy to have hopefully been wrong in our conversations about the Nationals so far this year. I don't think that they're going to overtake Atlanta. They are 4.5 games back of them, but I think that the wild cards, the wild card slot, the first wild card slot is comfortably theirs at this point.
Yeah, as a division winner, but from how they began, if I can get them in the playoffs, I'll take that as a victory off of my.
Yeah, that's a W, man. That's a big old Washington W. Behind them, I do have the Oakland A's, who are kicking butts and taking names, and the butts that they're kicking happen to be the leaders of the division that they're in, which is good for them and bad for the Astros.
It's a very, very quick way to close a gap.
Right. And I like Tampa Bay, man. Tampa Bay's playing good baseball. But they're playing exactly the same baseball as the Atlanta Braves, and the Atlanta Braves have the better record, and they are in first place in their division. So I have the Braves at number 4. And then rounding out Braves at number 5
okay.
to round out that top 5.
I'm good with that. You know, better by 1 win. So yeah, no, I can't gripe on you on that.
Bottom 3, simple for me. Maybe not quite as simple as yours was. But my bottom 3 are the Baltimore Orioles, who are 1-9 in their last 10, and they have lost 5 games in a row.
That one was easy.
They are easily the worst team this week in the last 10 days. Next, just because of the sheer disappointment of 3-7, I have the Colorado Rockies still hanging around in my bottom 3. And then just by virtue of being the worst team in the league, I have the Detroit Tigers down there rounding out my bottom 3.
The fact that the Tigers are the worst team behind the Orioles really makes me sad.
Well, you know who it should make sad? Anyone from the northern part of the Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, this has been we talk about parity in baseball, and we have had a lot of teams this year who have started off poorly and have come on, and there is still a pretty good bit of run left for the last 6 weeks of the baseball season. And yes, folks, we are down to 6 weeks of regular season baseball in the 2019 Major League Baseball year. So we are coming down the stretch. We are pretty much at third and on the way home.
You remember how it just seems like it seems like just yesterday you and I were all giddy and happy and excited about the first pitch of the season and day 1 of Major League Baseball, and now here we are. And it's almost over again.
No, it doesn't seem that way. After the 2 months I had at work, it does not seem that close whatsoever.
Oh no, I'm not talking about actual passage of time. The actual passage of time has been slow. Yeah. But the baseball season seems to have disappeared kind of out from under us because of how life sort of got in the way.
Yeah, it really does. I agree with you there. I mean, I had a chance to get home early and watch a bit of the Yankees-Indians game. I mean, that team is interesting. And something that we're going to have to be looking at is this Gio Urshela kid. The way that he's playing, man, we talked about in the offseason this past year that Miguel Andujar was being tossed around as wanting to be moved by the ball club. And now they may finally have to pull that trigger, as Urshela seems like he might be solidifying his spot in this roster and on the infield. That leaves really Andujar as just a bat. And unless you don't think that Giancarlo Stanton is going to come back and be able to play consistently, all of a sudden Andujar doesn't really have a suitable fit for this ball club. Something definitely to keep in mind. Chris, great show. We managed to finally do it. We kept the show under, I think, just under an hour. So, guys, been a great show again. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Hope you all are enjoying having us back in. It's great to be back. Show 3 in the books. A very big week of baseball and a lot more to come. The races are going to heat up. The drama is going to be going full bore, and we'll be here to take you through it all the way across the plate here on the 2019 season. For Chris, I'm Graham. For everybody here at the Grueling Truth Network, good night, and we'll see you next week on Out of Left Field.